So great. I am actually going to stop sharing the screen, and I'd love to begin this with kind of a warm up, so we can all get to know who's in the room, the virtual room. So yeah, I would love to, I'll be going through my participant list, kind of calling on folks if you don't mind that. And if you could just kindly share your name and if you're an investee, what organization you're working for, and one thing you're curious about in today's session. So I am going to go in order here on the participant list. First, I think I see Sean here as Blind Beginnings. Would you mind kicking it off with an introduction to yourself?
Sorry, I came late, so I feel a little out of sorts, but I'm Sean Marcellet. I'm the Executive Director of Blind Beginnings, and we're just really trying to we're in the process of evaluating all the programs that we launched at the start of COVID and trying to determine what needs to continue and what things are going to look like moving forward in the immediate future. So I don't really know. I'm just here to be a sponge and absorb as much as I can and kind of just get ideas from other people and obviously from Meagan. So yeah, happy to be here.
Great, welcome, Sean. Next on my list, I see Nancy. Hi there.
Hi there. Hi, Meagan and everyone. I'm Nancy with Urban Horse Project. Happy to be here. We've suspended programs, so certainly looking at how to plan for and move forward, and just also evaluating, assessing how we're doing on our other priorities, because we're using the time, I think, quite usefully, and then any other tips around that. So, okay. But just on the infrastructure stuff that we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nancy. All right. Next, we have partner Neil. Are you there, Neil?
Sort of. I finally figured. Sorry to join you late, Meagan.
No problem.
I'm Neil Duke and SVP for 2 years, and lead partner with Amos of Umoja, as well as Children of the Street.
Great. Thank you, Neil. Next is partner Robin. Robin Lewis, are you there with us?
Hi, I'm Robin Lewis. I'm a longtime SVP partner. I'm here to get educated, and I'm interested in hearing the questions and seeing the reaction to the whole topic that Meagan's talking about.
Great, thanks, Robin. Next, I have Amos. Oh, Amos.
Unmute.
There you go. Amos, you're on mute. There you go.
I think I'm good.
It's tricky.
Yes, it's tricky. Sometimes you don't want to say it, but it's Amos from Umoja Operation Compassion Society. We are blessed to still be working remote, and also our programs are running in some form of way. Actually, yesterday we delivered a few packages thanks to SVP's funding and funding from Vancouver Foundation. We were able to send at least 50 packages to families, and we'll be reaching out to them every 2 weeks. So far we are managing, and I'm happy to be here to be listening to what Meagan has for us today.
Thank you. Next, I have Carol.
Hi, I'm going to start my video. I'm Carol, and I'm with One to One, and we do literacy tutoring for kids who struggle with reading. Right now, we pivoted to try and support kids by supporting their parents, but we're looking forward towards the fall and wrapping our heads around how we can deliver the same quality of program virtually.
Mm-hmm. Great. Next, I have partner, and oh, it just flipped. I have partner Nicole.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to attend. I am a lead partner with Alumni Red Fox, Take a Hike, and currently Backpack Buddies. And I am super keen to see how all the investees are making out in relative to what we're presenting today, and curious to see their reaction.
Great, thank you, Nicole. Next, I have Emma. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Emma. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. So nice to see you all. I almost feel like I'm at a mingle, seeing all the partners and feeling like I should have a glass of wine in my hand. And Red Fox has made a really good transition. Our funders have been really supportive and flexible, and we've managed to maintain all our programs and launch some new initiatives as well.
Great, thank you very much. Tatali. You're also on mute.
Hi, sorry. My name is Tatali, and I'm the Youth Empowerment Manager at Fresh Roots. So I have been so busy that I haven't been able to keep on with my evaluation plans for this year. So yeah, for me, it's important to start reconnecting so we can evaluate our programs this season, and then we have been able to run some of our programs, and then things have changed, and now we have a huge program, and yeah, so I need to figure out if and how can we evaluate that program and my other programs during the summer.
No big deal. Next, we have Sandy. And don't forget to unmute.
There we go. So I'm Sandy. I'm the Executive Director of Athletics for Kids. We provide funding for registration fees for kids to take part in sports programs to lower income families. We have not been doing any sports granting over the past couple of months because there have been no sports happening. But we have lost a couple of huge fundraisers, which were to take place this spring and in summer. And there's many other fundraisers that are likely not going to be going ahead. So we're in a bit of a tough place because sports are starting to open up. And I expect that we're going to get inundated with applications over the next 60 days. And we're down in funds. So I'm trying to stay the steady course. And we're probably going to have to reconfigure all of our policies around how much granting we're doing, how much each child is getting, and really kind of restructuring a lot of stuff in the near future. So it's going to be a lot of change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think finally we have Tracy.
Hello, good morning. My apologies for not being on video. I'm in the middle of some childcare here, so my apologies for not having the video on. Good morning, everyone. I'm in the unique position of being the interim executive director for fetal alcohol syndrome, fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, the Society of British Columbia. We are the Asante Center, and our executive director departed for her wonderful parental leave in March, just as we moved into work from home mode. So it has been quite a learning experience, and I'm here for that reason. And we've been able to successfully be working from home, although a good chunk of our work is also client facing, and we are currently in the works of putting together a plan for a slow reopening and seeing how that will look. So lots of planning ahead.
That's great. Thank you, Tracy. Great, so now everybody has some sense of who's in the virtual room. This would be a lot more personable if we were all in one space, but we do what we can in a Zoom context these days. Well, great, I kind of wanted to start with three, not caveats, some kind of notes to set this tone for today's conversation. And I said some of these things last time. I'll frame each of these strategic series with some of these pieces. But first, I want to clarify that right now we're talking about tools to use in the context of uncertainty. And I'll get into this a little bit about how evaluation in a context that's more certain than today might look different than the evaluation tools I'm offering today. However, if for example, your programs are currently on hold, but you're going to go back into programming shortly as restrictions relax, these tools still apply, and I think they apply in most contexts. But the way I curated this was to focus on the ones that would be most useful to those who were looking at how to navigate uncertainty while pivoting and adapting their programming. But it does apply to everyone. In the breakout groups, if you are kind of in hibernation or on pause and on some level, just answer the questions in the context of your regular programming. And if you are pivoting your programming or in the process of doing so, answer the questions in the context of your pivoted or shifted programming. And then the second clarification I wanted to make is that in uncertainty, one of the key things we can do is rely on one another and information on the ground to learn from each other's experience and expertise. So I'm here to offer some evaluation best practices. Take what you want, leave the rest, because some may be useful to you, some may not. And I really hope that the value of this is for you to learn from each other as peers as well and start to form relationships or continue building relationships that you already have. Yeah, and then, finally, the last point was take what you want, leave the rest, because everybody's context is a little bit different. So it's hard to kind of do a one stamp be all and all set of tips and practices. But as I did last time, if there's something that I'm hearing that I'm not providing today, or is a challenge that we want to dig into deeper, that will be placed into a resource pack, which is a Google Doc that will give you a wealth of resources to explore based on your needs and what I'm hearing today. If you have specific resource requests, please let me know in the chat box and I'll just add it to my list. And it took me, I promised it a lot sooner than I was actually able to deliver it. But for the resource pack, give me about a week because it takes me a lot of time to curate all this information for you, and then you'll have all of that together. Nancy, are you raising your hand? Or no? Okay, don't worry. And I don't mean to call you. I just want to make sure if you had something to say, that's totally fine. Okay, so I'm going to dip into my slides. So it's an ambitious agenda. We may not get to the third breakout. Let's just kind of see where we go and how robust the conversations are. But I do have the intention of having the same individuals breaking out into discussion groups in at three different times today. So we'll start out with I'll provide some framing on what measuring impact and defining success can look like right now and in a general context. And then we'll break out into some warm-up discussions with your group. And then I'll provide a getting started checklist. So some people may already have this whole checklist done, and others may find this somewhat useful as a trigger list to help them think about how they can go about measuring success right now and defining it. Breakout 2 is kind of exploring this checklist a little bit further together. And then after that, we'll dig into outcomes, which is a really interesting, complex topic, but I will try to keep it as simple as possible for today. And we'll do another exercise some of you might be familiar with. I love to do the if-then exercise to tease out intended outcomes. We're going to do it a little bit differently today, and hopefully there will be time for that one. And finally, I'll offer some final tips and outcomes specifically, and then we'll have questions and wrap up. So it's ambitious, I know, and this is an ambitious topic to cover. If we don't cover everything, I might pack it into a separate session in the future, so don't stress about that. The point is to make sure that the conversations happen in the way that they're supposed to and are organic and robust. So before diving in, some group agreements. These are conversations. We might be making ourselves a little bit vulnerable, talking about our challenges and what we're struggling with. So one, don't be afraid to ask for what you need, and don't be afraid to offer what you can. This is a time for exchange of knowledge and learning. And when you listen to build. So that means the opposite of that would be listening to identify places where you could critique. Just think about where you can build and add on to their thinking. And ask questions that are provocative but interesting and not necessarily, like digging into what's wrong with what they're doing. take the wisdom out of the room, but leave the names out. In some of these breakouts, perhaps some information might be shared that's a little bit more private and specific to an organization. So just respecting that the lessons there are valuable, but leaving the names out. Attending to impact. So if someone does get offended or something in a conversation, I don't expect that to happen today. Just as a reminder, try to attend to your impact as opposed to justifying what you have said. And 2 more, taking care of your needs. I don't have a break today. I will try to put one in the future, but it's just because the topic is so ambitious today. So on that note, feel free to get up and take care of your needs as you wish. And ideally in between breakout sessions. Finally, this is a stressful time. We're all operating under the constant stress of uncertainty, unpredictability, and worrying about what's going to happen in the future. And under that, we're all kind of we're going to make mistakes, we're going to fumble. And so giving each other that grace because we're all in this together. Great, so to begin kind of my introduction to this topic, I did talk about this a bit last time as well, but the idea of evaluation kind of shifts in this current context where things are constantly changing. So evaluation typically, in the way that I've been engaging with investees prior to COVID, has looked like established programs with predictable timelines and reasonably predictable conditions that may influence what's going on. So there might be slower shifts, like kids are changing their attitudes about food by what they're seeing on TV slowly over time. But right now we're in a time of rapid change and rapid shifting that's unpredictable. So instead of doing a time-based, very specific evaluation where you're super clear on what your intended outcomes are, this is going to be a bit more of an iterative process, looking at what can you learn and what can you do about it. And I'll offer that tool that I offered last time too, that's quite simple for keep framing those conversations and that evaluative process. And it also means that this feedback loop that you have between collecting the information of what's going on the ground, making sense of it, and then what you do about it is going to be a little bit faster, and it might also not be the exact same time frame each time. So an example is I've worked with an investee recently who wants to do an evaluation before like the situation relaxes a bit, because they know that that's going to influence the way people are going to engage in their programs. So they want to get a snapshot of how it's been up in the last few weeks before these conditions change. And that's an example of a good time in terms of timing for this feedback loop, because no longer you have an end of a school term, you have kind of unpredictable kind of historical points in time that you can work with to try to make sure you're going through this feedback loop on a basis that makes sense. So the tool that I offered last time, I'll offer again, is what, so what, now what? And this is rooted in a very specific form of evaluation called developmental evaluation. What I'm doing is covering the basics of traditional evaluation with hints of a developmental practice. We're not going to be talking about how to do full-on developmental evaluation. These talks are inspired by that practice, but that practice in and of itself is very involved and is probably not the right tool for right now. So going on this cycle of what, so what, now what, these are kind of the offerings that I have for and ideas that I have for strategic tool sessions in the future. So last time we talked about connecting with your community and gathering information on the ground, and that really goes in the what is going on category. In the so what box, we have making sense of what's going on. And part of making sense of what's going on is having an idea of what you think success should mean right now, a hypothesis about that, and a way to test it, a way to understand whether or not that's working, and if not, why. And then that leads us into the now what of it. We know that maybe we're not seeing as much attendance as we expected, or engagement isn't happening in the way we expect. So what do we do about that in order to shift the way we're operating to maybe improve that? There will be a poll at the end of this again to ask about what kind of session from that list above would be most interesting for us to cover. A quick summary of last time, there's a resource pack which has a lot more information in it, but we talked about different ways to stay connected with our communities to get information about how things are going in the context of social distancing. And some of the tools that came up were using existing participation data, using surveys. So that's a tool that I think a lot of folks will be leaning on for sure. Phone interviews, phone calls, and documenting the conversation in a rubric perhaps, or in some other form to collect data on the impact people are experiencing. Sometimes phone might be more accessible in case of internet connectivity.
Meagan,
yeah.
I'm hearing background voices or something. Could you maybe mute everybody but yourself?
Sure. I actually don't know how to do that. I could try though, but thank you for letting me know about that. Let's see. Does someone know how to do that and could teach me? If not, I'm looking it up here. Disable, chat, invite, pause, stop.
Well, we can all unmute ourselves or mute ourselves.
Yeah, just a call to folks to a reminder to please mute. And that's a skill on Zoom that I have yet to learn. I'm sorry. I don't want to waste our time figuring it out. It sounds like things are sounding better right now. Okay, noted for next time. So summary of last session's tools included, also some folks mentioned that they do regular check-ins with their staff that are working on the front lines or on the ground. And they were providing their observations of their interactions with folks, of communities that you're serving, as opposed to, or maybe in addition to polling the actual folks that you're serving as well. Some people mentioned text messages and getting photos from parents in order to learn about how their kids are doing and engaging with the programming. There's some other fun tools you can do to build into activities they're already doing that actually can tell you about their experience right now with your program, as well as their general experience. And that's listed in the resource document as well. And that's inclusive of the photo documentation piece. So there's a lot there, and it was a meaty session. And so if you have further questions about that, we can talk offline. But now for the first breakout, and you're going to have to give me a little bit of patience while I organize groups manually. But for breakout number 1, I'd like investees to spend about 2 minutes, reintroduce yourself quickly, your name and your organization, refresh, share how your organization is responding in this context, and share a little bit about a rose, a thorn, and a bud, something that's going well for you, something that's challenging, and a new, if you have a bud, any new ideas that you're working on. Try to keep this in the context of evaluation and measuring impact. If you don't have one, that's okay. Or if you feel compelled to speak about a different one, that's okay. The purpose of this breakout is just to get to know your breakout groups. So I'm going to reshare my screen, and we'll get into some slides here to talk about some what I might call low-hanging fruits when it comes to thinking about, okay, I've adapted my programming, we've been going for a few weeks, how can we just check in on how things are going? So what I encourage is for folks to consider looking at how is engagement happening first before you go to the outcomes. So engagement is the way in which people are actually interacting with the program and whether or not they are, versus what are the effects the program are having on those individuals. Because in building your program, you've had to shift the modality potentially to online, for example. And so the way people will engage will change. So my suggestion is to dig into this first in whatever way is possible. And here's a checklist. There might be other things, but I want to keep it simple in the 3 categories of participation, engagement, and satisfaction. So at the participation level, this is really looking at who is showing up and who is showing up the most, who are your super users, who's not showing up, and who might be dropping out over time. Those are all really interesting places to look for information about how easy it is to engage with what you're offering. By looking at who is showing up the most, you can start to understand the nature and the quality of your super users and maybe learn from them about how you can create that experience for others. So there's learnings by looking at those. By looking at who's not showing up, so this depends on how you deliver your programming. If you have a set list of people you had invited and you only see a certain percentage showing up, you have an easy way to kind of see who isn't showing up from that group. This question might look differently for other folks. If you broadcasted this widely, for example, and you're opening it to participants nationwide, etc., it might be interesting to look at the question differently: who is showing up, who is not showing up, in terms of demographics and age, for example, ethnicity, background, region. Depending on who you intended for this program to be delivered to, it would be interesting to compare who is showing up, who's not, and how does that compare to what you intended. This will look different in each context. So I offered some examples of how that could look. If you want to talk this one through further, or any of these, let's have an offline conversation. There'll be chances to dig into this too in your breakouts. On engagement, this is really a question of how are they engaging? And we talked about this sticky point last time too, because when you can't see them, they're in their own homes and they might be engaging with the computer, you don't really know what that engagement looks like. But there are shortcuts and ways to kind of get some information about that. We talked about it a little bit last time. Some examples are getting observations from other folks in the home or having them actually document their day and their experience to give you a picture of what that program looks like in the context of everything else they're doing. So how are they engaging? This is referring to kind of the frequency. How frequently are they showing up? Or how many, if you're offering multiple programs, are they showing up to many of them or just one or two? And then like, if you're able to get information about once they are present and attending the program, what are some actions that you would hope to see that indicate a satisfactory or meaningful level of engagement? Could it be, if it's a group discussion, are they speaking up? Or is it that they're completing their assignments and activities, for example? So it'll look different in each context, but asking yourself the question, what does meaningful engagement look like in this context for us? And then figuring out what it looks like in reality and comparing it to what you're expecting. And then the next layer is satisfaction. So we now have ruled out any issues. We know everybody's participating, everyone's engaging at the level that they're expected to, but maybe they're engaging with something they're not very happy with, so they're not going to engage for much longer.
It's not a good time.
Probably not the case. Oh, Emma, do you mind muting? Sorry to call you out. No, it's okay. So on the satisfaction side, this is really, okay, now that they are engaging, how satisfied are they with the experience? Whether it's the accessibility to the tool that you're providing, the usability of what you're offering, or the actual content. And so when you're designing a survey, and if you want to make it quick and simple, you could probably just target questions around engagement and satisfaction. And that gives you enough information probably to find a few tweaks you can make to your programming right away. Participation, you can ask about in surveys if you don't have that information directly. Some organizations and programs lend themselves nicely to tracking participation data easily, and others don't. And on the satisfaction side, it'd be interesting to compare how people are experiencing your program in comparison to their needs. So getting clear on what their needs are, a nice way to have a point for comparison here. Before I move on, because the next step will be another breakout session where we'll talk about this in depth, are there any questions about this checklist, or do you have anything to add or change from your experience? Okay. If questions come up, please do let me know. We're going to move into breakouts again, same groups. If I can swing it, I will try my best to cover. I did practice, but I'm just not nailing it. So with breakout, number 2, these are the questions I'd like investees to discuss, spending about 2 minutes per person on what's one area on this checklist you might want to start tracking and why? What are you curious about? Number 2, what's one area on this checklist you're already tracking? How are you doing it? Share your tips and what are you learning from it? If one of these questions isn't relevant to you, you can just pick the other one. but try to answer both if you can. We'll move on to the next bit of content. I want to dive a bit into outcomes. And so I'll share my screen once again. You'll get to see the slide. So we haven't talked about outcomes yet. We've just talked about participation, engagement, and satisfaction. The next layer is outcomes. And this is what we love to know about because this is the core of what we do. And also it's important for reporting out to funders. They often want to hear about outcomes. So I want to refresh. Some people are really familiar with this. Am I muted? Someone messaged me. No, I'm fine. Okay, we're good. So yes, when we look at outcomes, some people are familiar with this framework that I offer and others are not. So I'll quickly go over it. I like to use a pond analogy whereby your intervention or your program is a pebble being dropped into a pond of water, causing ripples extending outwards into the pond. And with each ripple is a layer of impact. So with the first layer, your first ripple, you're really thinking about the immediate outputs or the things that came out of what you did. Number of meals served, number of people served. Some of the stuff we just talked about, participation data, that fits into the output category. The next layer out is outcomes. So, okay, what changes happened or what effects did those people feel in the very short term? The next ring out is, okay, how about a little bit later on, either after engaging with the program for a long period of time or sometime after they've engaged with the program, have you had an effect or a change on their behavior or life or way of thinking? And the external ring, and you can have as many rings as you want, but I try to limit it to 3 for most folks, is really about like much more longer term. And it depends on the organization, how you want to define long term. Some people think really big about society and community, and others think about kids maybe 5 to 10 years later, or perhaps graduation, etc. So depending on what is useful for you, this framework helps you think about, here are all the outcomes I hope and think and know that we're having. Let's organize them along these categories and outputs, short, medium, and long term. The exercise I like to do is we brainstorm a bunch of outcomes together with various stakeholders, and then we map them on this to kind of see, okay, let's start to understand what our short, medium, and long-term outcomes are. And we'll have a lot of Post-it notes and we start to cluster them by theme. So here's socio-emotional development, here's physical health, etc. So depending on your context, the clusters will look different, but those are examples of how you might cluster some of your outcomes. That's how we normally would do it if you're doing capacity building work with me and you want to clarify your outcomes and build a logic model or theory of change. Today it looks different, right? Because we don't quite know what the mid and long term look like. So my encouragement is first stick to the basics with participation, engagement, satisfaction, and then maybe look at short-term outcomes for now. And you can set up the system to like check in on medium and long-term outcomes later on. But right now you want information, I'm assuming, to kind of know how things are going over the last 3 weeks of your program and how you might need to tweak it or adjust it or adapt it. So focusing on the shorter term outcomes is what I'm going to do in my tips that I offer today and in our conversations. And so, yeah, when we actually do kind of a map, we'll draw this on the wall and we'll be putting sticky notes in each of these circles of different outcomes that you're hoping to have, whether it's graduation rates or, they go home and tell their parents something new about food. Okay, so I'm debating if we have time for this. I think I'm going to go for it and give it a try because I think this is where the meat is for everybody. We're going to do another breakout session using an exercise I like to call if then. I've rephrased it so that it helps us bring us back into the immediacy of short-term outcomes. So when you go into your breakout groups, you're going to be filling in this Mad Lib by doing, and you can just briefly say what your program is. We are expecting that. And just talk for about a minute about the impact you hope to see, the outcomes you hope to see. After a minute, and hopefully someone in your group can help you time keep, the rest of the group can have up to a minute, it might not take that long, to reflect what they've heard. And maybe as the person is talking, they're noting down outcomes that they're hearing as the initial person is speaking. and then reflecting them back. So this is a chance for you to just kind of start talking, have other people take a couple notes, and then reflect back to you maybe a list of outcomes that they're hearing. This can be an interesting exercise to help you step outside of yourself a little bit, and to help kind of sharpen what you're trying to do. Great. So this exercise, some of us have done together before in a slightly different way, but this is if you're trying to think about how to define success right now in this moment, this exercise can be helpful in bringing a few people together in the room with different perspectives on your program, maybe someone who's more on the ground, ED, maybe even a participant and a virtual room, to go through this exercise and think about what outcomes you are hoping to see or intending and expecting to see. And then bringing that all together and organizing them into kind of priority ones. And I would probably say, like, stick to, I don't want to give you a prescriptive number, but stick to a small number, single digits of outcomes, intended outcomes right now. You've got a lot on your plate. You're already looking at hopefully participant engagement and satisfaction. That's already a lot to try to figure out. And so to try to tack on outcomes on top of that in the short term is really tough in this context. So if you can kind of do this exercise, highlight the outcomes. If you're not already clear on your intended outcomes, and that's totally normal and okay, try to narrow it, boil it down to like your top 3, 4, or 5. Maybe the number looks more than that, depending on the size and scale of your program. I offer a couple of tips that I do in general for kind of after this exercise. If you do this with a group, you might end up with like 50 Post-its. But then you can start to remove duplicates. You can start to cluster them into themes in the way that I described before as well. Maybe a bunch of little outcomes roll up into kind of a bigger umbrella. If you need to narrow them down a little bit, you can think about which ones are most relevant to your community's needs. Obviously thinking about, I didn't put this on there, your audiences and what they might be interested in is obviously a very strategic move, meaning your donors might be interested in a specific type of impact. You might want to add 1 or 2 in there if it's a really important kind of political thing to do. And it might be useful for you too. And then what are outcomes you can learn about right now? So try to focus on that short term. So go back to your pond and think about, what does like the first ripple look like in terms of time definition? Is it just between now and the next time relaxation, the next phase of relaxation begins, and then we're going to do another check-in? Or is it until they return to school, which is a tough one because we don't really know when that's going to happen. So being clear on kind of what your short-term outcomes timeline looks like, and sticking to the ones that you know you can kind of assess right now. And then if you are still lost in a sea of outcomes, come back to your mission, vision, and values. That's always an interesting way to check in with yourself and see which ones are a priority. So you might not have this problem. It might be really clear for you what your core intended outcomes are right now that you're focusing on while you're navigating this uncertain space. But if you do feel kind of lost in a sea of outcomes, which is very common, these are some ways you can help narrow it down. If you need even more help, just call me, and I'm happy to be a thought partner on it, or call one of your peers here as well. So the last thing I wanted to offer is, if you do narrow down your outcomes and you still have an outcome that you really want to be able to measure or understand right now, but it still feels too long term, here's a tool you can use to create stepping stones that you can start to see now that lead to that longer term outcome. So these are called progress markers, and you might consider organizing your stepping stones into the basic ones, or what you're starting to see already in terms of outcomes, what you would like to see, and then what you would love to see. And I'm going to give an example. So in this example, the long-term outcome this particular organization is excited to keep learning about with its current programming in this uncertain context is, are we building habits around good eating? And that's really hard. Habit building and behavior change takes time. And so to understand whether you're making progress towards behavior change, you might take a few steps back and create little stepping stones in that direction. These stepping stones actually are modeled after the basic steps of behavior change. So I'll read through what they are. So at the beginning, it's you're unaware of the problem. In this case, you're unaware that eating food with poor nutrition has long-term effects. This is a total out there example. I'm not trying to make it beautiful. The next level is, okay, so you're now aware that eating food with poor nutrition has a long-term effect on your health, and you're aware of an alternative. You're aware that eating healthy food is better. That's progress, right? That's a stepping stone. The next level would be something like the person has started to inquire about new ways to shop for and prepare healthy food at home. So they're starting to explore and proactively ask about options. The next level is they actually take action. They go shopping and prepare a healthy meal at home, and they do it once. And then the next stepping stone is now they're doing it on a regular basis. And this will be totally tailored to your context. I would love to be a thought partner if you are trying to take a difficult outcome that feels a little too far reaching to measure right now in this moment to adopt your programming in this context, and maybe help you work with stepping back to think about what would stepping stones to that outcome look like. There's not much science to it. You can use kind of research-based frameworks like this one around behavior change. But if that's not relevant to your context, if you're not doing behavior change, we can look at other ways to do that. So as an offer, if you are working on coming up with stepping stones to kind of get clear on what outcomes you can measure right now, and you want to run them by me and send your progress marker steps to me, I'm happy to have a look and offer feedback on them or have a conversation about it. Again, this tool is something I haven't offered in the past before, so I know it's a new concept. But if it's something that's useful, please give it a shot. And I recognize this might not be relevant in everyone's context, so it's an offering. So on that note, I'd love to, with the last 8 minutes of our time today, and I know we've been in this for almost 90 minutes, is to dig into any questions you have about the content we've covered today, or any lingering questions about this topic of defining success right now and measuring kind of what you can about impact in the moment to adapt your programming. If you have questions about this process that are outstanding and you'd like to explore further or see covered in the resource pack, I'd love to hear from you. So I'm opening the floor to questions about content or other topics you'd like to go deeper on in this subject. Anyone have any questions or burning thoughts?
Meagan, I'll jump in. It might be more of a comment, but I guess the question is, what do you think and how might it be used? But I've really enjoyed your if this, then what exercise. And I used it not so much for our program because we've done quite a bit of work on that.
Yeah.
So I just, in this little moment, applied it to our current circumstances and kind of the strategic thinking of where we're trying to get to. So if we do this, what will happen from our use of our time now and how we can strengthen ourselves and learn, etc. So
cool.
It's more of a comment, but maybe you might have a comment on it.
Well, I think it could be useful just in the resource pack to like give some basic steps on how to do it. So it could be repeated, but I love that you're using it in the context now. Yeah, to explore new questions because it's a very flexible tool. So yeah, no, that's great. Absolutely. And for folks who haven't done it before with me, we usually take it far out. So if we do this, we hope to see children engage with books. If we see children engage with books, we hope to see them improve their reading. If we see them improve their reading, we take it out 3 to 5. And that's how we start to suss out your midterm and long-term outcomes. That's not appropriate for this context, so that's why we didn't do it that way. But for those who haven't done this exercise before, I wanted to share what the full one does look like. Any other questions or any other topics you'd like to cover if we were to talk about evaluation, measuring impact, defining success, and the future session? Anything that I can cover in the resource pack as well, just let me know. Anything else? I know it wasn't comprehensive, so. Okay.
Meagan, I have a quick question.
Sure, yeah.
This is a technology one. So when folks are, I guess, involved in a Zoom session, let's say, or whatever technology that they're using, it seems like the ability to gain the data points that would have been available in a face-to-face interaction aren't as available in Zoom, because then people go off and run their own way. I'm wondering if, from a technology standpoint, there's an option within the Zoom world to create a technological or a online solution to maybe just 3 questions about about a program that has just been experienced in a virtual way, so that those folks that are giving the program are able to quickly get some feedback with respect to how the program is going, because they don't have that face-to-face that they have relied on in the past.
Totally, yeah. We touched on it briefly in the last session, but what comes to mind most immediately would be, well, the polling option that is built into Zoom, but that's less robust. But I really like Poll Everywhere. So if people can click on a link and access I guess they have to be able to access the internet if they're on Zoom, click on the Poll Everywhere link, you're able to create a poll and get immediate feedback from folks, anonymized or not. You can set that up any way you want. In real time, people can see that information and you can talk about it. So yeah, that's certainly one great way to get some quick feedback right at the end of a session. And probably a great point, because people just will leave Zoom and go off and do their own thing. So sometimes getting in contact with folks is challenging. But you're also having me wonder, if Zoom has a way of tracking participation data for you? I wonder. I'm gonna explore that. I don't know the answer. Does anyone know? Yeah, okay. That could be useful. So if it's there, if it exists, I'll put it in the resource pack. Okay, so we have 3 minutes left. One more last call for questions. I want to make sure nothing's missed, but then we'll move to the poll. Anything else for now? Okay, I think we're good. I'm seeing head shakes. Great.